Backcountry hunters and anglers, we've been talking about this Steve Pearce nomination for quite a while. Not, I don't know, it's not like I'm not somebody who can't fight the good fight, but it seemed to me that this is a foregone conclusion, and a conversation that you and I had in the past. It was like, even if it is, there's an opportunity for accountability in these hearings. And, that's a great point, but accountability only works if people know the thing's happening. So we're really encouraging our members who love recreating on Bureau of Land Management land. And we have all sorts of members that do work in extractive industries and work on BLM lands in different capacities. And they needed to be aware of who Steve Pearce is, and want to push our senators to try to get some assurances out of the gate of how this guy's going to do this incredibly important and difficult job, managing 245,000 surface acres, or million surface acres. But your Conservation Lands Foundation, BLM, is literally your job, which is why it's so important to hear your thoughts. So were you surprised by the hearing today?
Yeah, well, thanks, Cal. It's nice to see you. So my name's Chris Hill. I'm the CEO of the Conservation Lands Foundation. And right, the Conservation Lands Foundation represents a broad, nonpartisan national network of community leaders who are solely focused on not only expanding and protecting, but restoring public lands that are managed by the Bureau of Land Management. So, as you said, over 245 million acres. BLM is our largest landowner. And so this appointment, this nomination is really important to Conservation Lands Foundation, our members and supporters, and all of our 84 plus local community groups who are all working on the same thing, working on BLM lands, working to restore and protect and conserve those lands. And so, we look at this nomination as, the country deserves a leader, a director who understands, believes, and implements the full scope of BLM's multi-use charter, right? And this includes managing conservation as a equal to all the other uses. So this was super important for us. I think, today's hearing, unfortunately, did not a lot to nearly nothing to alleviate some of those central concerns that we have surrounding Steve Pearce. And that central concern is around his longstanding record of advocating for the sale of public lands. And unfortunately, Mr. Pearce repeatedly throughout the hearing failed to directly disavow the idea of selling off our public lands, and really struggled to defend his worth as a nominee for the director of the Bureau of Land Management. He repeatedly tried to scapegoat his past positions, and instead of addressing how the history of his past positions and his advocating for selling off public lands aligns with leading the BLM. So, we witnessed over and over again that he deflected from a lot of questions that he could have alleviated some of the concerns that Conservation Lands Foundation has and others have, and really failed to reassure the people that he would prioritize public lands over privatization and really prioritize that conservation piece on equal footing. It's unfortunate, and I think Senator Hickenlooper I really loved his line of questioning because it really brought out some key pieces that I thought were really important. But he said, towards the end of his questioning, he said, when someone reveals themselves to you, believe them. And Pearce's record, his track record, reveals himself to us. And this hearing didn't do anything to change that belief. And in fact, it furthered the distrust of his morals and values of public lands. And I don't think that we should, as a country, be fooled that a shift in his tone at the hearing today should be a mistake for the shifts in beliefs that he has. We didn't see that. So overall, Cal, I felt like the hearing was incredibly underwhelming and an unconvincing show.
There's obviously been a lot of lead up to this hearing, and different groups, different individuals have really built up a persona that probably didn't match up to the individual that was speaking today, which I just kind of want to address, because it's not uncommon to have somebody who is on the record saying things that you really disagree with, like, oh, there's too much public land, for instance. Mm-hmm. And then when they're given this opportunity to speak very publicly, they do bring your guard down more often than not, in my experience, right? Because these people are where they are because they are really good at talking, really good at making friends and inroads, right? And I do want to pull like a couple of positives here. And there's one, I guess, would just be like, he did say twice how he's got personal connections to the outdoors, and was able to like say like, oh yeah, I like the outdoors. They helped me through when I got back from Vietnam. I was backpacking in California. He made another reference, like a slight hunting connection reference there too. And, you know, I do take those as positives because there's at least something to kind of build off of there in further conversations, or good reminders to go back to and say, well, you said this, like, how have things changed to where you would consider denying other people that opportunity? And, you know, there's some political theater here too. It's like, if somebody's gonna line you up with a hard question, they may also throw out a nice easy question to help balance that stuff out. Who do you think answered, or I guess who do you think gave the hard questions today?
Yeah, it is a lot of political theater, and the lining of questions is pretty typical from hearing to hearing from our Congress people and senators, and I think that's what we saw today. I really did like the questioning from Senator Hickenlooper, which I had already mentioned. I think that he dove a bit deeper into trying to elicit and trying to get out from Pearce a disavowalment of the things that he has said in the past about public land sell-off. And I think that was important to keep honing in on that piece, because that really is the piece that's the key piece that a lot of our supporters and folks across the country do not want, right? BLM is the manager of 245 million acres of our public lands across the country, the largest of all of the agencies, and this person is the one that is going to be managing those public lands. And so I think trying to pull out from him, how does your past record add up to where you are supposed to sit in this seat? What does that actually look like? And we didn't quite get there, unfortunately. And what we have to remember is taking what was said in the hearing today and juxtaposing that with what we know of from Pearce's record in the past, right? He has a long-standing support for privatizing our public lands. I think it was as early as 2012 in a speech to the Colorado Conservative Political Action Conference. It was there where he pledged to reverse the trend, quote, reverse the trend of public ownership, right? That's directly in contradiction to BLM's multi-use mandate, in balancing conservation, recreation, and responsible development. And so, like, there's many, many, many more examples where his record just doesn't add up to the fact that, you know, he loves to go outside with his family, and there is where he found solitude and so forth and so on. You know, his record in New Mexico is the same way. It raises a lot of serious concerns, and you heard that in the hearing today. He pushed to cut Oregon Mountain Desert Peaks National Monument by 88%. That doesn't add up with what a BLM director should be doing in terms of really laying out the multi-use mandate for that agency. And so I think you're right in that if you aren't paying attention and you just listened to this hearing, you may hear something different than what folks on the ground and organizations have really been saying over the last number of weeks around.
Right,
you know,
because he did basically say he supports monuments today.
Exactly. Right. He said that. He absolutely did say that, and I think maybe on a couple accounts. I don't know how that adds up to his work in his own state of New Mexico around Oregon Mountains Desert Peaks National Monument, and that national monument had overwhelming local and public support, right? And until this day, it's proven to have great, massive economic benefits for that region and for Las Cruces. So I don't know how you're able to put those two together, and unfortunately, this was the time for him to really talk to the public and talk to the senators about where he has come from, like where he came from and where he's moving as he moves into this position if he gets voted on, and he didn't do that.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's important to remember, I guess, give the grace to be like, guy's never had this job before. And yeah, that is his background. But this job is defined as this. Pretty simple thing to say, and many opportunities to say that. What I thought was really interesting on another version of the same question, are you going to sell off America's public lands? You know, he kept saying, well, that's not the mandate here. And we're not even allowed to do large-scale land sell-offs. Versus saying, no, that's not going to happen on my watch. And, you know, it's important for everybody to remember, like, land sell-offs in the budget reconciliation process, that didn't start because the director of the Bureau of Land Management wanted to sell BLM land. Mm-hmm. Right? There's the buck doesn't necessarily stop with the director of the BLM.
Yeah, that's right. And also, I think this is a key piece because we heard that time and time again. the agency can't wholesale sell off public lands. It's not in my job description as the director of Bureau of Land Management to be able to sell off public lands. It's not in our jurisdiction. It's not as in our purview. And okay, while that is correct, right? They don't have the authority. The BLM director can't unilaterally sell off wholesale public lands. The BLM director can't do that, right? They can't sell off large swaths of land, but they can and do have control over a lot of other things. They do have control over how existing disposal authority is used. They have control over a number of things. And to me, there was an opportunity that was missed. It wasn't whether he has the authority to do that. The real question and concern to me is around influence, discretion, and implementation power that he does have the authority over. And so for me, what I was hoping to hear, what I didn't, like, words matter. When someone has publicly pledged to, reverse the trend of public ownership, it raises legitimate concerns about how they would interpret their mandate as the director to manage these lands in a public use manner. The director controls policy decisions, the implementation of those policy decisions. They have significant authority over land use planning, leasing, rights of way, how aggressively or unaggressively they use disposal of land authorities across the country. These decisions shape whether public lands are strengthened or weakened under their purview and within the Bureau of Land Management. And so it's not this idea that there's like large scale sell-off, right? But it is that they do have the authority to do a lot of other things underneath them. And I think, one of the pieces that I've been thinking about, like, BLM already has the authority for disposal of certain lands, right? We all know that, and it happens a lot. The director who, it's how they use that authority and how aggressively they use it, how they interpret those authorities or reinterpret those authorities or advocate to Congress. And I think there was a question in the hearing around that. It's how they advocate to Congress around those expanded disposal authorities. So to brush this idea off that, we don't have authority to do large scale sell off, like, that's not in our purview, that's in Congress and the administration, that's a farce. And I think that was just a way to move away from that discussion and that conversation.
Well, yeah, the director of the BLM can completely set the stage and package BLM lands for large-scale disposal.
Right.
Like, they can authorize the time of and dollars of the Bureau of Land Management to expedite sell-offs in acreages of just about any size, as long as they're broken up accordingly. So, and then, one of my most favorite themes that that applies to a lot of things up there in DC, right, is like, what's his definition of large scale versus what's outlined in FLIPFA, or, pick your government acronym. And then access as well popped up today too, which I was happy to see, because I see, the word access never being defined. And to kind of like jump over to that positive thing, like Pearce did say, he's like, grew up poor in New Mexico. Where we got to vacation was up in Cloudcroft on, I think that's a lot of Cloudcroft, New Mexico there's a lot of Forest Service land up there too, I think.
Okay.
But it's a mix. And so I liked hearing that there was that connection there, and ideally a recognition of the fact that going out on America's public lands are the big vacation of the year for millions of Americans. And hopefully that is something that is buried in his brain, and that'll be up to organizations like ours to remind him of if and when he is confirmed. But yeah, I think that I guess two things can be true at the same time. I think it would be the wrong idea to walk away from today's hearing thinking that this guy is going to be holding public land as something that is there on the same plane for extraction as recreation. Mm-hmm. I got an inkling of his access perspective when he said there should be more access. And I have a friend who's in a wheelchair trying to, and access on public lands that are in high demand only really works if there's a mix of opportunities. And from his comment, and I do get kind of more aware when the Americans with Disabilities conversation comes in to access, because so often that's used as the thing that nobody wants to argue with in order to get all sorts of different access through. And America's landscapes, BLM lands, are so diverse that they can't be generalized. They're sensitive ecosystems, and you have to have a really tailored travel management plan if you want to preserve the awesome ecosystem services, the beautiful landscapes, the wildlife, and have access.
Yeah, well, but here's the thing, Cal, is, there's a lot of really great organizations that are working on equitable access to the outdoors, but in order for us to even get to the equitable access piece, we have to have nature and protected lands in order for us to do that work and get folks out on the land and experience nature and the benefits, whether that's camping with our families and having or that's hunting and fishing. And his comments around the access piece, okay, great, but they still don't add up to the other comments around selling off lands. And there was, just to think about the access piece and just people getting out on the land, there was a really great survey that came out a couple of weeks ago. I think it maybe was 2 weeks ago, that was polling people on, public lands and getting outside and what that looked like. And I think it was over 91% of voters opposed the idea of reducing or removing national monument protections. And the proposals for sell-off or hand-off control of our shared national monuments were incredibly unpopular, with around 70% of Westerners opposed. And that was compared to 56%, I think, in 2017. So the public is getting aware of this, and the opposition to the work that Steve Pearce has been trying to do over his tenure is wildly unpopular. And I think that's just showing, right? And that's showing like where the people are. And I hope that the senators continue to hear from folks on the ground and folks in their community on the issues that matter the most: getting out on public lands, continuing to keep our national monument protections, restore more national monument protections, and have access to those lands to get out with their family and friends and recreate.
So what are the next steps? What do you want to see people do here? Because, we both watched the same hearing. I don't think we're going to see, outside of like act of God things, I don't see Mr. Pearce here not getting confirmed.
Well, listen. The country deserves a BLM leader who not only understands, but also believes in his heart and fully implements the full scope of BLM's multi-use charter. And we deserve a leader who puts managing conservation on equal footing with all the other uses of the lands. And I think that's what we're fighting for, Cal. Like, that's what we're fighting for, and that's where the pressure and the power of the people in the communities to talk to their senators is where it's going to come from. I mean, yes, we have a very, very short window. We had the hearing today. The committee is going to vote soon. So we have a short window to really put pressure on our senators about Steve Pearce's nomination for BLM director. I think it's super important for folks to continue to call into their senators' offices and urge their senators either by phone or by email to oppose this nomination. We are urging our people to oppose this nomination. We don't think he is, simply put, the right person for this job, and he is not fit for this job. We need to be able to hold our Congress people accountable, and if in fact Steve Pearce does go through and he gets voted out of committee and voted out on the floor, if he does get put through, we need to be able to hold him accountable to the things that he said in the hearing, whether we believe them or not. If he does go through, we will soon find out. We need to be able to hold him and the senators who voted for him accountable in order to move forward. Because at the end of the day, these 245 million acres of our public lands are going to be in his portfolio. And we want to make sure that they are not stripped away of land and water protections, that they are preserved and protected for not only this generation, but for future generations. So the fight it's a long-term game, right? It is a long-term fight that we're going to continue to fight, but every little step counts. And this is one of those little steps.
Accountability is hard because it takes consistency. Got to be there.
Exactly.
Every time, all the time.
Exactly.
I think, in my personal email to my Senator Steve Daines, it's going to say, you need to ask him this question specifically. And if he responds in any other way, then do not confirm this guy. And that question is going to be, are you as the director of the BLM, going to hold our conservation values as high as extractive use, and are you going to support land sell-off either piecemeal or wholesale?
Right. Yes. And what does that look like to him, right? What does it actually look like to Steve Pearce to hold conservation on equal footing to the other works of the agency? What does it actually look like? I think that would be an interesting question and an answer to hear. And then also an assertion that piecemealed, which is the best way to put it, not large scale, right? Because we understand the authorities of the BLM and the director, but what does it look like for him to have piecemealed, small scale sell off, whether that's through all of the things we talked about today? What does that look like? I think it's important moving into the next couple of days before the committee vote. They're still going to be talking to Steve Pearce, right? Senators are going to be having conversations. There's going to be still a number of things that need to move forward. And so there is a very small but influential time period that we actually can influence our senators to ask those tough questions, Cal, that you're just talking about.
Yeah, and that time is right now. I think if you read through how Bureau of Land Management lands can be sold, if it was his objective, as long as he made each sale under, was it 2,500 acres, I think. Anyway, he could sell all 245 million acres as individual allotments under the maximum threshold that he's allowed, as long as they're individual sales. So there's a lot of power here. Yeah.
Right.
And I'm fully on board with you as far as like, got to find more ways to provide that accountability, and showing these folks that they're under the spotlight and we're paying attention is just one of them. So for everybody who did send in questions ahead of time, thank you very much. If you liked what your senator asked, now would be a phenomenal time to say thank you. And don't feel like you can't say, but please ask this as a follow-up. It's critical. And if you don't,
absolutely,
we'd prefer you just said no.
Right.
It's a big job.
Absolutely. Do you guys have a portal on your website on how people can contact their senators?
Yep, we do. We have a good take action on the website that'll put you in touch with your senator. It'll be one click away.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, Cal, for the combo. You have anything else for me?
I don't, but I know we'll be talking a lot more.
Yeah, it's gonna. This will definitely heat up in the next couple of days, and I think there's going to be a lot of talk on social and other platforms as to like where this is going, and I'm sure folks will be able to quickly hear when the vote gets scheduled in the committee. And until that time, reach out to your senator, have them ask the tough questions, talk about what's important to you on public lands, and why this person who is managing our largest amount of public lands in our country is important, and what that looks like to you. And and let's continue the drumbeat. Let's continue the pressure. It's working. You know, Cal, that's one thing I will stress. The pressure is working, and that pressure builds up. And so let's keep going. Now's not the time to rest.
Yeah, darn right. I don't want to stop until I know we can get somebody in there who knows what it's like to crawl through a bunch of prickly pear cactus after an antelope. You know, that's what BLM land is to me, and knows why you should enjoy it.
Exactly.